The slider allows to select a single value from a range of values, and we want to implement vertical sliders and horizontal sliders with different kind of shapes, with different labels in different sizes and also in different colors and so on. If you are new here, subscribe to my channel and make sure to watch this video till the end. We want to get started by implementing a slider in different colors. To implement a slider, you always need a value, and here we want to create first of all a value which is 50, and then we want to create here the slider within our build method, and here inside you need to pass then exactly this value, and you also need to set here a min and max value, and the min value is here displayed then on the left side, so in our case it's 0, and the max value is in our case 100, and here it is on the right side. And lastly, we need to implement this on changed handler, and here you always get then the value of the slider which you have currently selected. So this means if I change here the slider position, then we always get the current position of the slider. And this value which we get, we save then within our state. And lastly, you also need to call here the set state to update your UI. And now you see here the slider, and you can already change the slider, and the value is then going here inside of this field. Next, we want to change the color of our slider, and therefore you have here this active color, which I set right now to red. And this is then the active part, our left side here. And you see this has then a red color. And you also can set here this other color, which is here our inactive color. And here I set it to a red color, which is a bit transparent. And this looks then like this. And now we have here also our inactive color in a different color. Now we also want to integrate here this overlay where our current selected value is displayed. And therefore you have here this property label, and here inside you need to set then our value, for example right now 50, and then you need to round it and you convert it to a string because this label always takes a string. And to make this label work, you also need to have divisions, so I set here 20 divisions. And if you now divide your max value by the divisions, then you get the value of 5. And you see every time we have here 5 in change if we change our value, because we have here 20 divisions from the value of 0 until the value of 100. And now you can also change here the divisions. So I put here, for example, 100 divisions inside. And this means this time that we divide 100 by 100 and our value is then 1. And this means I can now always change here this value, and it is always changing the value by 1. Let's now create also a second slider, so I simply duplicate our current slider. And here we simply remove our current active color and our inactive color. And now instead of using here our active and inactive color, we can also wrap here around a slider theme. So you can wrap it here around your slider or also around your column. And here inside you need to supply then this slider theme data. And then you can also modify here the colors of your slider. So I can put here the active track color inside, and I put it here right now to a green color. And now you see that our active track color is here in a color of green. And you can also set here the inactive track color, and I set it here to a gray color. And now you see we have here this gray color. Next, you can also change the color of your sump, and therefore you have here this property sump color, and I set it here to a green color without opacity. And now you see that we have here this green color for our sump. And like you can see, our theme is applied here to the first slider, however not to the second slider, and this is because here we have supplied the active and inactive color, and therefore our theme data is not working for this slider. However, you can simply remove here this inactive color and the active color, and then also this slider has here this slider theme data. However, I will put it again back to the active and inactive color. Next, you can also change here the color around your sump if you have selected it. And right now we have here this bluish color. However, I set it right now here to the overlay color of green with some opacity. And now if I select here this sump, you see that we have here this opacity around our selected state. In the selected state, you also have this box where you display your number, and we want to change also the background color, and therefore you have here this field which is called value indicator color, and this is basically the background color, and I set it here to a color of green. And now if I select here the slider, the background of our value is in green. Next, we want to change here our division number to 10. And then you see here always these little dots in your slider, and this is not really cool, I guess. And therefore we also want to change it. And therefore you can set here the color of these active ticks if you like. And therefore I simply override here the active tick mark color, and here I set it to transparent. However, you can also set another color, and I want to hide right now this active tick. And now if I zoom here again inside, you see we have here no tick anymore. And secondly, you can also change here the color of the inactive side. And therefore I set here this inactive tick mark color, and I set it here to a color of transparent. And with this, you see that on the inactive side, there is also no tick mark color anymore. Next, we want to look at how we can change the slider width and height. And we will also look at how we can integrate labels and also like different kind of shapes. And by the way, if you want to get here this whole source code of this application, you can get it with the first link in the description, and with the second link you can get access to my Flutter courses where I teach you how you can become a more efficient and better developer. Let's get started now by changing the size of our sliders. Therefore, we have here again two sliders, and we want to change first of all the size of our slider, and therefore I simply wrap here around the size box and I set here a width of 250. And with this one you can basically change then the width of your slider. And to change the height of your slider, you need to go to your slider theme data, which you have wrapped around your slider. And here inside you have a property which is called track height. And here I set, for example, 16 pixels. And now you see that our slider is here bigger and we have now 16 pixels in height. Our sump is now almost no visible anymore, and therefore you can also change the sump size. And here you have then the sump shape, and you set it to a round slider sump shape, and here you can basically set the radius of your sump, and I set it here now to 20. And now you see that we have here a bigger sump, and you can also change it to other values if you like to make it bigger or less bigger. If I click on the sump of our slider, you see there is some shadow around, and this is also what you can change. And therefore you have here within your slider theme data this property overlay shape. And here you basically can then change the radius of your overlay. And I put here a higher radius of 50 inside. And now if I click here on the slider, you see that the radius of our shadow is bigger. If I put it instead to 30 our overlay radius, then you also see that the radius shrinked again a bit. Now we want to integrate some labels for our slider so that the user can read it better. And therefore you could put the labels on top of your slider, or secondly you can also put the labels to the left and to the right side. To add labels on the left and on the right side, you simply wrap your slider inside of a row, and you also put your slider inside of an expanded widget, and this will make sure that the slider gets all the available space it needs. And secondly, we create here a label to the left side, and here we basically put the min value inside, which we also put here within our slider. So I have here this field min value, which is 20, and this is going here inside. And secondly, we want to create the max value, and this is what we create here at the end, and here we put then our max value inside. And this max value is also going inside of our slider. And lastly, we need to create here this side label method. So I create here this method and we return here a text. And here we get basically then the value, which is max or min, and we round it and also convert it to a string. And optionally, you can also set here a fixed size for your text. So I set it here to a width of 25 pixels. And now we have here on the left side our min value, which we have defined. And also on the right side, we have here our max value. If I change the slider position, the user can always see the value. And also if I go to the end, the user sees here this value also if it is not selected. Alternatively, you can also create here for each value a label, and then the user knows exactly which value he has selected. For our second slider, we create an index instead of a value. And this means before we had always a value which holds then the exact value of our slider. However, this time it is different. So if our index is 0, then the first value is selected. If our index is 1, then the second value is selected. If our index is 2, then the third value is selected, and so on. And therefore I have created here this time a slider, and I have here this min, max and divisions value which we want to fill. First of all, I create here a list of all the labels which we have for our slider, and here I have then all the different string values for our slider. Next we define here our min value, and this is always the first index, and this is the value of 0. And secondly, we select here our last index, which is here this index, and you simply can get the max value by labels.length -1, and this is then exactly this index here. We also need to define how many divisions we have, and therefore you simply take here the length of our labels, and this is what you subtract -1 from. And lastly, you need to set here this value, and we take here this time not the real value of our slider, instead we take here the index, and basically the min value is an index, and also our max value is an index, and also our value itself is then the index. And also within our unchanged, we every time put the value which we selected to our index. And our index can be then a value between 0, 1, 2, 3 or 4. Now with the setup we are pretty far, and we want to display here our labels on top of our slider. Therefore I have wrapped our slider inside of a column, and here on top we simply create a container, and inside of this container we create a row where we also want to display all of our labels. And therefore I have here created this utils method to go over all of our labels, and then we get basically the index of our label and also the label text. And you basically can get here the source code with the first link in the description, and then you can basically copy this utils class. And here within this function we want to build now our individual label, and we want to first of all check if our label is selected, and this is what you can easily do by this index. So this is the index of our label, so if our label is currently this index, then the index is also 0, and if our label value is currently 18, then we have here the index 1 within our index field. And here we basically check if our selected index is within this range, and we later needed to display here our selected state. Like you can see, our selected state is here displayed in bold letters, and our unselected state is here in this other text color. And now we simply define here the color of our selected state, and therefore I set here the selected color, and otherwise I put here the unselected color. And therefore I simply create here two fields. The first one is the selected color, which will be this black color, and the other color is a gray color, which you see here on the right side, and this is our unselected color. And now that we have determined the color of our label, we only need to build it, and therefore I simply create here a new method, build label. And here I put then the label itself inside and also the color. And then we want to create here our build label method. And exactly like before, we create here again a container with some text. And this time we also align it here to the center, give it some text style. And we also set here our color so that our color is different for the selected state and also for the inactive state. And now you see that our example here works, and we have here always our selected state in this black color and our unselected in this gray color. Right now, if I select here a value, then you always see here this overlay with our number inside. And if you don't like it, then you can go to your slider, and here you can delete the label which I have put inside. And now if I have commented this out, you see we don't have this overlay anymore. We also want to create a slider with a different kind of shape, so you have here these stops in between and also a label on top. And at the end of the video we will also create here this vertical slider. To change the shape of our slider, we simply wrap here a slider theme data around, and therefore I create here a new class which is called custom slider theme, and here we put then our slider inside, which we now want to change. In our custom slider theme class, we simply wrap here around our child, which is our slider, this slider theme around. So this is exactly what we did before to manipulate our slider, only this time we have a class for it. And first of all, you can set here the height of your slider. I set it here to 5. Next, we can also change here the color of our slider. So we want to have here this active color and also this inactive color. And therefore, I simply create here these two fields, the active color and the inactive color. And here within our slider theme data, we set then first of all the inactive color. And here I basically set this inactive tick mark color and also the track color. And now if I hot reload, you see that we have here this inactive color for our inactive state. And we also want to create the active color. And this is what you can then do with the sum color parameter to change here the color of this sum. And then we also change here the track color, which is the color here on the left side. And now if I hot reload, you see we have here this active color, which I have set to this color of red. Next, we want to change here the size of our stops in between and also the size of our sum. And therefore I create here two fields. The first one is our sum radius and I set it here to 14. And also the stops in between we set it here to 8. So it's a bit less. And now you can set here the sum size, so you can manipulate the sum shape. And here every time we put then the sum radius inside. And now if I hot reload, you see that our sum is bigger. And lastly, you can also change here the stops in between. And therefore you simply add here this tick mark shape. And here you put then this tick mark radius inside, which we have defined here at the top. And now if we hot reload, you see that we have here also our stops integrated. And if you like, you can also change here this value. So for example, I put it here to 12 and then you see that our stops are also bigger. And you can also change here the sum radius and make it also bigger. At the end, we also want to look at how we can integrate a Cupertino slider. After this, we will look at how we can change the disabled style of our slider. And then we also create here this vertical slider. To add a Cupertino slider, you simply write here a normal slider and then you write here in front Cupertino. And this will make then our slider to a Cupertino styled slider. And if you want to change here the size of your slider, you can also put it within a container. And here I put, for example, it to the maximum width. And now our slider has here the maximum width and we also can change here our slider. You also have here a property which is called onChangeStart and onChangeEnd. And this means every time if you try to change here your value, then it says start its dragging in your console. And if I finish this dragging, then it says finish dragging and he's going inside of this function. So if you start dragging, then he's going here inside, and if you finish your dragging, then he is going inside of this. And then you can basically do here inside your logic what should happen if the user ended the selection. Within the Cupertino slider, I also can set here the active color and I set it here to a reddish color. And now you see that our track color is in this red color. And we also can set our sum color. So I set it here to a red color without opacity. And then also our sum has here a different color. Next, we want to create here this disabled slider and we want to change here the colors of our disabled state. First of all, to make a slider disabled, you simply go to your slider and here within the onChanged, you set the value to null. And this will make that our slider is not changeable anymore. And secondly, you can go to your slider theme data and here you can then set first of all the track color. And here we set then the disabled state. And here we basically set the disabled active track color. And this is then here this left side and I put it here to this blue color. And now you see that our disabled state has this blue color for our track. You also can set here the disabled inactive track color and this is then the track color on our right side. And I keep here right now the same gray like before. And you also can set here your disabled sum color and therefore you have here this property disabled sum color. And here I set it also to this blue color and then we also have here our blue disabled color. And at the very end, we also want to create here this vertical slider. Before we make our slider vertical, I also go to the slider theme data and here I set the track height to 80. And now we have here a height of 80 pixels. After this, you go to your slider and here basically I wrap it inside of a rotated box and I set then the quarter turns to 3. And now if I hot reload, you see that our slider turns around and we can basically change here the value of our slider. Next, we want to display here inside of the middle our current value. And what I do therefore is to simply wrap here our rotated box, our slider, inside of a stack. And then I simply display here a centered text. And here inside of this text, I put the value inside, which is the value of our slider, which I have here within our state. And I also set it here to a white color, this text, and now it is displayed here inside of the middle. And I also can change here this value and then this value is always updated. If you like, you can also change the shape of your vertical slider, and therefore you go to your scene data, and here you can set this track shape. And here I set then a rectangular slider track shape. And now our slider will be rectangular. Next, like you can see, we also have here every time this sump, and this is not pretty cool, and therefore you can also hide the sump and also this overlay around, and also here this indicator with our number on the left side. And therefore you go again to your scene data, and here you set then these 3 fields, and you set all of these to no overlay. And the first property will then hide here our sump. The second one will hide here this overlay around our sump, because here we have this shadow around our sump. And the last property will hide then this value here on the left side. And now if I hot reload, you see that the sump is not there anymore, and I also can change here the value of our slider. Hello everyone, thank you so much for watching this video. Please make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel here to get the latest news about Flutter, and see you soon. Bye!